Immigration in the Gilded Age. History of immigration. The United States has experienced waves of immigration as early as tens of thousands of years ago, when the original inhabitants came from crossing a land bridge that connected Asia and North America. Then came the 1500s, in which the first Europeans, led by Spanish and French, could start establishing settlements in the U.S. Soon enough, there came to be a mixture of ethnic groups including the English, Africans, Scottish, Irish, Germans, Dutch, French, and others. Many of America's first settlers came for a variety of reasons such as economy, opportunity, the increase in slave trade, political freedom, and religious freedom. From 1830 to 1890, there was a second wave of immigrants who arrived from northern and western Europe. They consisted of primarily the Irish and Germans. They both came in large numbers and were the first immigrants groups to bring about native hostility and organized opposition to immigrants in the U.S. Many Chinese immigrants also started to arrive in America to escape poverty and war as a result of the 1849 California Gold Rush. By late 1800s and the beginning of the 1900s, over 80% of immigrants started to come from southern and eastern Europe. These immigrants left their countries due to high population and growth in southern and eastern Europe, lack of jobs and food, scarcity of available farmland, and more. Because of the arrival of these new immigrants, in 1965, Ellis Island was established, which was an immigration station for European immigrants located in New York Harbor. Asian immigrants, however, were required to enter the country through Angel Island. In the later part of the 1800s, it became harder and harder for Asian immigrants to enter the country. Soon enough, immigration for the Chinese came to a halt, and with the enactment of the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. Nativism. Nativism is defined as a preference to establish U.S. residents, as opposed to foreigners or others considered to be outside, and the opposition to immigrants. One of the biggest causes of nativism was the fear that immigrants would take jobs, leaving Americans jobless, homeless, or with lower pay. Social Darwinism, a belief in unfair business practices and racial superiority due to certain characteristics and moral attributes in manifest destiny, which was the belief of cultural and racial superiority over other nations, also became a cause of such behavior. Nativism gave rise to consequences like the creation of the Know Nothing Party, a political party that advocated nativism, and the revival of the KKK, a group of people that were prejudiced against immigrants. Know Nothing. The Know Nothing Party, as mentioned before, was a political party that fully supported nativism. It was formed in the 1950s, and its goal was to keep the government compromised of native-born citizens. The Know Nothing Party wanted restrictions on immigration, foreign-born people to be excluded from voting or holding public office, and 21 years of residency in order to obtain citizenship. When people questioned their organization, they responded by saying they knew nothing.
The Chinese Exclusion Act. The Chinese Exclusion Act was created in 1882 by President Chester A. Arthur. Its name implies exactly what it did. The Chinese couldn't immigrate to the U.S. They were excluded. If any Chinese wanted to immigrate to the U.S., they had to be approved by the Chinese government to be granted access to the U.S. as non-laborers. The Geary Act extended the Chinese Exclusion Act 10 more years, doubling its lifespan. The Geary Act also required existing Chinese immigrants to obtain certificates of residence and from the IRS to avoid deportation. Eventually, however, the act was repealed in 1943. The National Origin Act. The National Origins Act was a law that restricted immigration by establishing a system of national quotas that discriminated against immigrants from southern and eastern Europe and excluded almost all Asians. In 1890, only 2% of any ethnic group was admitted into the U.S. To make matters even worse, the act denied immigration to anyone the Supreme Court prohibited U.S. citizenship to. Asians were affected by this the worst. The National Origin Act lowered the annual quota of immigration by nearly 200,000. It was eventually terminated in 1924. The melting pot. The melting pot is a metaphor reference to the assimilation immigrants adjusted to in moving to the U.S. The melting pot is the basis for the national identity of the U.S., which comprised the mixing of many cultures to form one unique identity. Later on, the melting pot was renamed into the salad bowl theory to be more accurate. Salad bowl. With a wave of new immigrants, the melting pot was renamed the salad bowl theory. The rename theory is a metaphor for the uneven salad-like appearance of of the culture in the U.S. Some cultures are more prominent than others, and others play larger roles in the identity of the U.S. Salable theory recognizes that the U.S. does not have one unified culture. It's many cultures in the same location.